Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a computer programming instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to make an HTML page using Visual Studio. So I'll start Visual Studio 2013 and start a new project. I'm going to make an ASP.NET web application, and I'm going to call it HTML CSS demo. And store it in a directory I created to store this demo. I'm going to select the empty template, and I'm not going to add any of these core reference options. So we'll start off with a very empty project. To add an HTML page, I'm going to right-click on the project, not the solution, but the project, and I'm going to add a new item. I'm picking HTML page, and I'm going to call this page HTML CSS demo. This adds the page to our project. You can see it over here on the right, and it opens it up here on the left. If I close that and double click on it, it opens it up again. I'm going to title this page HTML demo. Anything that you place here in the title block will show up on the tab for that page when it's rendered by the HTML client. In our case, we're going to use Chrome. And I'm going to put some text here in the body of the page and just say hello ASP.NET. If I then build a solution and then start it without debugging, we get a very simple web page. We can see there's the text that we put in the body. It's showing up here in the body of the web page, and our title shows up here in the top of the tab of this web page. So if this is the first time you've done anything with HTML, congratulations. You've just made your first web page. The next thing we want to do is add a little bit more complexity to this page. So I'm going to replace our text, and I'm going to start putting in some tags. You'll notice that IntelliSense helps us out here. And IntelliSense is this drop-down that shows up as I start typing. And it tries to guess what we want to type. When it's successfully guessed it, you can use something called tab completion. When I hit tab, you'll notice that it writes out the tag. And so all of these elements that are between angle braces are HTML tags. They're XML formatted tags, and basically they have some default formatting of their own, and we're going to learn later how to use CSS to change their formatting. Here I created a header block, and I've put in use some H1 tags to style this header, and I'm just going to put some elements in here and use some placeholders to demonstrate some of how a page is rendered. I've just put in a nav block, and I'm creating an unordered list. That's what UL stands for. And with an unordered list, it's a content tag which you can put several more elements in. In this case, a multitude of list items. That's what LI stands for. And the nav is a navigation block. So I'm just simulating placing in different tags, and these would probably could potentially be anchor tags that would be links to other web pages. For now, I'm just putting in some placeholders to demonstrate the concept. Another frequently used tag is a div tag. It's basically a division. It's a way of separating elements of your page. And in this case, I'm creating a main content division. And you'll notice here what I've done is I've added what's called an attribute. So the tag is a div tag, and this ID attribute allows me to identify this tag. This will come in handy later when we want to style specific elements in the page. And so an ID tag can be used to identify one tag element in the page. I'm going to create an element called an aside element. The paragraph tag allows me to, basically it's the same thing as a paragraph in a Word document. It will have a carriage return basically automatically added to the end of each paragraph. So now we have a basic HTML page. It's got a header element, a navigation element, which eventually we'd like to have on the left side, an aside element, which we'll want to have on the right side of this division, a division, which is the main content, and a footer. Again, I'll build this and display the page. And this is what the page looks like. And we notice that we have all of our elements in here, but they're not really positioned exactly where we might eventually want them to be. And that's because HTML doesn't automatically position things or style them based on just what you happened to have called them. And this probably, if you've ever seen early HTML page, this is the styling, which is the default, which is what HTML pages look like early on, when they're primarily just being used as a way to store documents. So we see that the header, everything has the same font and spacing. We notice that the header, because it has these H1 tags, is styled a little bit differently. We obviously would like to be able to control this style a little bit more. To do that, we're going to add something called a style sheet. So I'm going to right-click on my project and add a new item and select Style Sheet. And I'm just going to call this Style Sheet Demo. And you'll notice that it starts off by giving us a style for the body of the HTML page. And the way this works is we can tell CSS how we want, what elements we want to style in our page. So for the body, let's say we wanted to set the font to Arial. and set the font size to 10px. And let's say we also want to style the header. So this header block over here. We just identify the tag that we want to style and what attributes we want to set. Notice that conveniently IntelliSense gives us a drop down to pick what we might want to style, and we can use tab completion to type out all the elements. And here we're specifically setting the number of pixels. You can also pick some default attributes that will set the style or the size of a font. So either way works. We're not going to go through every single tag, but you can go to w3schools.com and they have a very good reference for HTML tags and their attributes. So for example, if I want to learn about paragraphs, and they would give me a good explanation of it, some examples, and give me some information on how to do some common things you need to do with HTML tags. It's a very complete and very convenient and well laid out website. They have examples and explanations on how to do different types of styling using CSS. So for example, here on fonts, it gives me information on fonts. I highly recommend reading that and learning about that. This is not necessarily an HTML CSS course. This is orientation for ASP.NET, but you can learn more from W3 Schools. So let's see what this looks like now. I'm going to use Control F5. If you hit Control F5 from your style sheet, you'll get this error, and that's because it's trying to render the CSS page, which it can't. You have to make sure you have your HTML page selected, and then when you hit Control F5, it'll actually render it. And we see that there's no changes yet. And that's because we have to tell, from this page has to tell the client where that HTML page resides. And we can do that with a link tag. So with our link tag, we're going to set it to style sheet. We're going to set the type equal to text CSS, and we're going to provide an href. And the nice thing about IntelliSense, again, is it can look into your solution and find what's available. So we want an href to our style sheet. And we'll now give this another try. And we can see that now it is taking the style sheet and it's applying those style elements to our page. Before, it had the default, essentially Times New Roman, I think. Now it's using Arial and Agency for the fonts, and it's set the size of the fonts on the page. So looking at this page, the next thing we want to do is we would like this navigation not to be in line with everything else, but to float to the left. And it would be nice if this aside would float to the right. So let's see if we can add those styles. So for the nav, we're going to add a float left. We're also going to set its height to 500px, its width to 200px, padding to 5px, and we'll explain that in a second, and vertical align to top. So what's this padding about? Again, we can go back to W3 Schools, and if we look up padding, we'll see that it says CSS padding properties define the space between the element border and the element content. Well, to understand that, it helps us to look at this box model. And so the CSS box model is essentially this. Here you have your content. So that would be, for example, everything within a particular tag. So either navigation item 1, 2, and 3, or our articles. And around that content, the padding attribute refers to the space that the client will render between the content and the border. If you have a border, the border appears next, and then outside of that is the margin. So the margin is what's outside of the border, the padding is what is inside the border, and that positions things within your content. Otherwise, what would happen is your border would be right up against the letters of your text, and that wouldn't look very good. And similarly, you don't want your border to run right up against the text that's on the top, bottom, left, or right, and so we typically want some margin and some padding. Let's see what this looks like. And we can see now our navigation is floating to the left as we specified. We specified a height and width, which we'll see better when we add some color to this. And we set the vertical alignment to top. And so now what we want to do is we want this aside element to be to the right. If we view page source, we can kind of see all those elements. And if you, from page source, if you click on this reference, it'll actually bring you to your style sheet, and you can see the style sheet. So the next thing we want to do is do an aside, is style the aside, which is this element right here. And we're just going to float it to the right. And now we see that before the aside was in line, and now aside is to the right. So we have a navigation element, the main content, and this aside element. So things are basically positioned where we want. And let's continue on. Let's set some color to make it easier to see which elements are which. So we're going to take the header, and we're going to set a background color and a few other elements. Let's first do a text align so that it's centered. That way the header will be centered in a position it's at. And we're going to set the color, we can set the color of the text using the color attribute. And you can pick a color just by scrolling down and seeing what's available as standard colors. So we'll pick white. We can also set the background color. And to do that, we could use a standard color, but if you hit the number sign, as if you're about to write an RGB color value, which consists of 3 numbers representing the red, green, blue combinations, you can pick a color off this color picker, which Microsoft conveniently gives us. And so we'll just pick a color. And in our nav, we're just going to set its background color. And you can, again, pick a basic color and maybe navigate down to something. The other options are you can actually type in your numbers if you happen to know what numbers you want. We can also, in CSS, let's say we wanted to change the styling of this main content area. So far, we've been using what are essentially tag selectors, which basically we specify the tag we want, for example, header or nav. We can also, if we use a number sign in the selector and put the name of an ID field, for example, main content, we can set styles that will only apply to that ID area, or that identified field. So I've set some more styles for a number of elements, for most of the elements in this page. And now we can see that the elements that are in this page. We have our navigation to the left. We have our main content area, which is in gray, and we have this aside, which is in this color blue. Notice, though, that we have all this spacing around our elements. And why is that? Well, it turns out that all clients, whether it's Chrome or Internet Explorer or Firefox, have defaults that set some padding and spacing around our elements. And perhaps one way we could do that is by putting a border. So one of the things we can do is we can actually style multiple elements by putting all of them in one style block and just separate them by commas. So now I'm making a style that will be associated with all of those elements. And I'm just going to set the padding to 5px. And now the padding is consistent perhaps, but it doesn't really solve the look of this page yet. So what we can do is, and it's probably good practice with your CSS pages, is remove all the default styling that the web page, or that the browser may add. And you can do that by using what's called this all selector, this asterisk, which means that we're going to set all elements to a margin of 0 and padding of 0. This will remove the defaults from the page. Gotten rid of all of that spaces between our pages, and now it is only rendering what we styled, which is what we want. In our header, we can add a border to show what that looks like. So let's see what we have. And admittedly not a very pretty looking web page, but it shows you the areas and how to position things correctly. So let's say we want a picture in that aside. We're we're going to add a folder, and we're going to call it images. And you can open a folder in File Explorer. And right now our images folder is empty. I'm going to pull a picture of the best computer in the world, the ZX81. And we can add existing item in order to make that visible in our Solution Explorer. So in our image, we want our image to show up in this aside over here. And we use an H2 tag. And here I'm going to actually use a inline style. And I'm going to say style equals enter in parentheses. We can use the same type of attributes that we've used here directly on that one element. So this is a style sheet over on the right. Here we're using an inline style. And I'm going to set font size to 12px. And if you want to specifically place a character turn, you can use a break element. Notice that most of our tags have a beginning and end tag specified by the /. Here, you can do it all in one line. You don't have to have, for example, BR and then. In fact, it won't let me do it in Visual Studio. So this is a self-closing tag, which has the slash next to it, and that just puts character turn in our page. And we're going to create an image tag. The alt element is what will show up if someone's viewing this with, say, a viewer or a browser doesn't show images. It'll replace it with this text. Also, for accessibility purposes, you should use alt tags with all of your pictures so that if someone's using a online reader, that it will read that to, say, someone who's visually impaired, rather than rendering the image. Again, Visual Studio knows what's in your Solution Explorer, so it makes it available to you with IntelliSense. You can specify the height and width attributes of your image, and then, of course, close it. So that's an image tag. And let's see what that does. And there we have it, the picture of the best computer in the world, the ZX81, in our little side. So now we've seen two ways of styling elements. We can use a style sheet, or we can use an inline style. Another method that we can use is what's called an inline style sheet. And to use an inline style sheet, we go up here in the header block, or an internal style sheet. And for the internal style sheet, we will add a style tag. We have to specify the type. And just like we do with the external style sheet, which is the CSS file, the internal style sheet, we can style the same way, using the same attributes. So I'm going to set a font. And I'm going to do similar border elements. So the border, the style, and the color. I'm going to do the same thing for the header, so we should see some border showing up here. So there's my header border, and underneath the section, there's a border. So that's a third way that we can style. We can create a internal style sheet, an external style sheet, or we can do inline styles. What's the advantages and disadvantages of all of these? Well, the nice thing about an external style sheet is that you can use this to apply to multiple pages. So if you want to standardize the way your pages appear to multiple pages, you put those styles in an external style sheet. If you want to standardize how things look on a single page, then that's the internal style sheet. And if you just want to style a single element, you can use an inline style. Another convenient thing we can do is we can use what's called a class selector. So let's say we wanted to have a class called emphasis, and we want to apply it. In this case, we're going to apply it just to this second article. So here I'm saying article has a class attribute called emphasis. And what's the difference between an ID and a class? Well, an ID can only apply to one element, but a class can apply to multiple elements. So, for example, emphasis would be a logical thing to create as a class, and then we could apply it to multiple things on the page. Inside my style sheet, I can then say emphasis. I'm going to set the color to red, and font weight to bold. And it says, in all things it's important to spell correctly. And there we see that Article 2 is in fact red and it's bolded. And then you could use this anywhere you want it. So for example, now I've had it on navigation item 2 as well. So this is a way of reusing a style in multiple areas, is by having a class selector. And in fact, that's probably one of the primary ways in if we're making .NET applications to set styles which are going to be used in multiple areas. Some other changes we can do is we can change unordered list to a bulleted list. That'd be an ordered list. Notice when I change it to an ordered list, it doesn't do anything yet. Only when I apply the styles does the ordered list show the numbering. Another type of tag which is very useful is something called an anchor tag. An anchor tag is basically a link. You need to set an href, which is the URL that you want to go to. And we can see in the footer now, you'll actually go to that link. We can style our anchor tags just like everything else. Now our link is yellow. And so that concludes the elements that I'm demonstrating with this HTML demo. We've made a basic page. We've used CSS to style and position elements on the page using the float attributes to set our navigation to the left and to the right. We've included an image. We've shown how we can set a border, padding, and how to use ID selectors and how to use class selectors in order to style multiple elements on the page.